All right, let's move on to things economic. And as you know, last week we officially went into recession. Though apparently it's not really a recession. No one's lost their job. No one's been hurt. It's kind of a technical recession, says Labor. There's nothing to worry about. You just get on with your life and vote to return a Labor-led government, is what they say. But is it true? Is this just a recession created by the Reserve Bank to get some inflation, some post-COVID inflation out of the system? Or is it like bad recession, a recession that hurts, that might put businesses to the wall, that might cost people jobs, even though finding people to fill jobs is difficult right now? Well, for, I guess, an assessment of that and what the average business in the street is feeling, we're joined now from Kirk from Business New Zealand, the biggest business lobby and advocacy group in the country. Kirk, welcome back to the platform, mate. Is it a real recession or not?
Welcome. Good morning, Sean. Hey, look, a couple of points that I'd make so business services were down 3.5%. What does that mean? People are spending less money in businesses. There are more businesses closing as a result of that. But what would probably concern me the most when I was looking at this data was people. So some consumer spending was down, but travel and international spending was up. Grocery spending was down. So what that tells you is that people who, have money are spending it on international travel. People who don't have money, though, are spending less money on groceries. So that tells you, while these words technical recession are all very interesting, it is having a very real impact on people's lives. And I think most particularly for, the business community, we see that on a fairly regular basis.
Okay, so you're saying it's not good enough to say this is just technical, don't worry about it, not really a recession.
Yeah, I think what's happened is, as a result of clearly the Reserve Bank's action on interest rates, which was needed, but those things have a real impact. It's taking money out of people's mortgage holders' pockets, and that means it's not being spent in the economy. That's jobs that are being lost, and we are seeing that. I think Jared Kirk from Kiwi Bank had suggested that unemployment might peak around 5.5%. 5.5% next year. Now, you'd say, okay, 5.5% is not that high. It's not like a real recession.
Yeah.
Actually, that's still people's lives, right? Still people's lives. Still businesses going to the wall.
Yeah. But, Kirk, some would also argue that we haven't got enough workers for the jobs we have. We could do with the economy slowing down a little bit. We don't seem to have a lot of capacity, for example, for growth and work in this country at the present.
Yeah, well, I guess that's a function of having the border closed for so long. I think we are still starting to see some people come back into the country, particularly skilled migrant workers in the IT sector, because that's one of the areas where we're actually seeing growth opportunities. And it's an area where those things are from a services perspective are good for New Zealand, weightless exports. They can't be tariffed, helpfully. So those are good things. There are industries which are struggling. I think you saw it in Zespri's result this year. They didn't have enough workers. Their income was down. So it is having an impact. And we had told the government that some of their policies around immigration were going to hurt the economy. So I guess some of the chickens are coming home to roost now.
All right. You also mentioned, Kirk, that, prices going up at the supermarket, interest rates for people with mortgages are going up. But, and I'll be honest, I've noticed it, particularly in terms of the advertising market, people are prepared to go on holiday again, flash holidays again. Are we in danger of having a recession for one sector or the most vulnerable people in our economy, while the least vulnerable say, damn the torpedoes, can continue to have a good time?
Well, look, if you don't have a mortgage, then you wouldn't probably be sustaining that particular increase in your own personal, in your household spending, right? So you're probably less impacted. But businesses and households that have had to wear that cost, they will. It's been a nearly tripling of the interest rate. So, they are they're going to be hurting. If you're not impacted, good. I think you're still spending. That's great. But if you don't have that money and suddenly a lot more is out of your back pocket, it's pretty tough.
Look, a question I failed to ask Cameron Baggery last Friday when we had him on. What are the predictions for the next quarter of growth? Negative again?
Yeah, I think so, because, I remember, I think we were talking about this last year when, the Reserve Bank started tightening. And I said about half of New Zealand mortgages were going to roll in the next 12 months.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe more. Yeah, so I would see this going on while the tightening phase is going on. So I think probably the Reserve Bank has hit pause on further tightening. What does that mean? It means that interest rates are probably going to stay static. That means they're going to stay static at this rate. So that is still money out of people's pockets. We're not seeing anything that would too much that would say we're going to see those interest rates come down a bit. So I do think it's going to be pretty tough. I do think next quarter, I think we will continue to have negative growth the next quarter. It's just a function of really that tightening phase, which was steep, fast, and having an impact in terms of inflation.
Does the electoral cycle, does the fact we got an election in 3.5 months, does that, Kirk, also negatively impact on the economy because of the uncertainty that creates? And certainly with the polls the way they are, no one could pick it.
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting question, Sean, because normally what happens in an election year is investment does slow down. But what was fascinating about this GDP data was actually that business investment grew 2% for that quarter.
Yeah.
Now, that is unusual because typically you would see business say, I'm going to wait and see what the outcome of this election is because, I need to have some more certainty. There are obviously businesses that are going well. As I said, I alluded to that around the IT sector and those particular forms of business where they're saying, actually, we're going to invest for growth because whatever the election result, we think we're still going to have that growth because mostly it's coming from offshore markets.
Yeah, yep, I hear you absolutely. And I got to say, look, I spent Saturday at Field Days in Hamilton. It didn't look like there was a shortage of money there or money for investment or people buying utes. It seemed to me that people were quite enjoying being out and about and getting into their business in the ag sector.
Yeah, well, it's good to see that because, they, from a regulatory perspective, I think it was there was a pretty strong export result anticipated, in terms of our overall exports. I think they were at the highest they've ever been, or predicted to be last week from MPI.
Yeah, there are a lot of people saying that's just inflation.
Yes, that's true as well, but it's also less product being sold for a higher price. So that's the inflationary impact. Yeah. So I guess what we are looking at is a bit of a transition, I think, for agriculture. One of the things again that was impacting agricultural production was regulation. This government has increased the regulatory burden for the agricultural sector. There's no doubt about that, and that has had an impact in the way that they have had to operate. So their profitability was actually down, even though the headline numbers were quite good.
And Kirk, the other thing about recession and business confidence is it feeds off itself. Okay, technically a recession, that's what all the numbers tell us, but how businesses respond is really how they're feeling, isn't it? And whether or not they can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, also I think what you might see, typically after what we've been through, you see a cycle of consolidation. You'll see merger and acquisition activity. You'll see businesses that have capital go, okay, I can take some of my competitors out of the market here by buying them, and create a larger scale business for myself. And you'll see a bit of that activity, I think, coming out of this. But that will be for those businesses that are well capitalised or are able to access capital quickly and easily. And the businesses that aren't, that is a very tough period of time for those business owners.
Kirk, thank you very much indeed for joining us again. I don't know. I do not know what to make of this recession. There's many things to many people, I think, would be my response. I thank you for your time. Kirk Hope, CEO of Business New Zealand. This text just says, rubbish, we've had the bank on our backs, not the only ones either. I'd love to hear from you if you have had to do a deal with the bank on the mortgage, or if you're in business, how the recession feeds through to you. Of course, Labour's line, what recession? Nothing to see here. I think Kirk was somewhere in between. He said, yeah, there's a recession. Also, some sectors doing well, and some people who aren't paying mortgage are doing well. People like Ben doesn't have to worry about recession. He hasn't got a mortgage.